Good morning and welcome to our Saturday conversation with the Avon Valley Churches. My name is John Towler and I'm an associate priest with the Avon Valley Churches. And my guest this morning is a well-known figure at St Mary's Fordingbridge, our organist and choirmaster, Tim Ruffer. Tim's full-time job was with the Royal School of Church Music, which, as you probably know, is based in Salisbury, and where he holds the post of Head of Publishing. Tim, welcome.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for the introduction.
Tim, where did you get your interest in music from?
Well, it's probably more of a case of when didn't I have an interest in music? I've got two older brothers. One is 7 years older and the other 5. And David, my elder brother, more or less just as I was born, went off to the Chichester Cathedral school, the Prebendal School in Chichester, where he was in the choir and actually ended up being head chorister. So a lot of my early years were taken actually going on the train from Brighton to Chichester, going to the Southern Cathedral Festival and, you know, evensongs and things like that, and you know, to go and see my big brother. And so, you know, one of my earliest memories is actually going to the very first, the first UK performance of Bernstein's Chichester Psalms, and you know, sort of on the train home, sort of singing all the tunes. You know, so it was you know, had a huge effect on me, and you know, as a 5-year-old, it was quite something. Yeah,
great influence.
Yeah,
which led, of course, to in parallel with what I might call your, I won't call it a secular job, but your other jobs, clearly led to a musical career. So
yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, some people have accused me of having a hobby that is my work. So,
well, good for you.
Well, yeah, and but you know, then if you have a passion for something, you know, you might as well try and earn a living out of it. And so, you know, I went. I read music at Goldsmiths College London. After that, I really didn't know what the hell I was going to do, you know, with my life. The current government, in a way, is slightly right, is that in that saying that a music degree is absolutely useless for most people. But in actual fact, I was able to do something with it, and I ended up working in a music shop in Esher in Surrey, which I did for the vast, well, for most of the 1980s.
And this is selling music and instruments and
music and pianos, actually. And we had a piano restoration department and a tuning department, so it was mostly pianos. But I also ran the sheet music department as well. And it was through that I got sort of headhunted by a company called Boozy and Hawkes Music Publishers Limited.
Very well known.
Very well known, and still in my mind the leading classical music publishers. I mean, they publish Stravinsky, Rachmaninoff, Shostakovich, a lot of Russian composers. They had big connections with the Russian state publishers at the time, but also Benjamin Britten, James Macmillan, Peter Maxwell Davis, and my all-time favourite, John Adams. So, you know, I've gone a bit forward, but what I was going to say is, so I got 2 phone calls on the same day, and my life seems to have had a lot of serendipitous phone calls, which it's quite nice. It sort of gives me a feeling that somebody's looking out there for me. But I had the choice to either go for this interview at Boozy and Hawkes, or to meet the Bishop of Chichester with a view to ministerial training on the same day. So so both interviews, both phone calls came on the same day, and both interviews would have been on the same day. And so I had to make a choice. And the way I reasoned it was that the ministerial training is something that could probably wait another 10 years or something. But the Boozy and Hawkes offer was something that I felt I should take. There was all these composers which had been in my blood from literally, Leonard Bernstein, composer of the Chichester Psalms, was himself a Boozy and Hawkes composer. So, I had literally grown up listening to Boozy and Hawkes music, and, it seemed...
Amazing opportunity.
Yeah, it seemed I had to take it. And, if it meant putting something else on ice, then so be it. The fact that things changed. I mean, both would have been life-changing, whichever choice I...
So what happened to the thought about ordination?
Well, I kind of knew that if I went for this job, it would have been in central London. It would have required commuting up to London every day. I'd come home, pretty knackered. I just wouldn't really have a chance to sort of do those sort of things parallel. And at the time, I was director of music in my local church, which was a church called All Saints Crawley Down, which is in mid Sussex, and not far from East Grinstead, which was where I caught the train from to go up to London. So, in a way, my choir directing and organ playing has been my way of serving God.
And as you say, your current job at the RSCM, where you've been for quite a long while, somehow kind of combines that. Well, your hobby, if I can put it that way, your faith, your faith, yes. and your church music, and it's like, and your publishing. Yes. So, I mean, what a wonderful combination.
It was, yeah. I mean, I'd sort of got to where I could at Boozy's, and there was a new managing director in 2001, I think, and he and I didn't really see eye to eye. So I negotiated an exit at the end of the year, and I was taking a choir practice, probably the first choir practice of 2002, in the church I was then the director of music of, which was called Holy Trinity Forest Row, which again was in Sussex, but actually east rather than west. So I was taking choir practice, and I got a phone call to say that my father had a stroke. So I left Boozy and Hawkes on the 31st of December, and within literally a week, I got a phone call to say that my father had a stroke, and essentially I spent the next 3-4 months going to Brighton every day to see my father in hospital, essentially being with him as he went on his final journey, and it was a very those sort of things don't happen by chance.
So again, you kind of felt that there was some kind of pattern, some kind of meaning in this for you.
Yes, some sort of, almost serendipity about it. And so, yeah, it was the beginning of April, I think my father died. And within a couple of weeks, I got another phone call, completely out of the blue, from a woman called Julia Harrison Place, who was the bursar at the Royal School of Church Music. Never met her, never heard of her. And she said that I'd been recommended to her
It's good.
Yeah, because they had their head of publishing was leaving, and would I like to come and chat to them about it? So I said yes. And that's to say, that was in 2002. I started in May 2002, and I've been there ever since. And this was when the RSCM was in Cleveland Lodge in Surrey.
Okay.
And again, the really lovely thing about that for me was that, I mean, not only was, as you said, it was all about liturgy, and at that time, Common Worship had just come out. So a lot of the work I was doing then was, formation in using Common Worship, which was really interesting. So, I got to know people on the liturgical commission, and, it sort of brought aspects of liturgy that I really, as a normal director of music, you wouldn't come across. It was why some decisions have been made about the different Eucharistic prayers and all that sort of thing. So it sort of started in me a real interest and fascination for liturgy. And
liturgy from the inside.
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
From the inside. Yeah. And so very briefly, your job is what, promoting this just different works that are being composed, or?
I suppose it's there's a bit of commissioning, working with composers, which is lovely. We've got a sort of handful of composers that I've got to know in the past 19 years very well. And as you know, in St Mary's Fordingbridge, we've just started using a new mass setting, which was written by Peter Nardone, who I've known since the late 80s. We've been great friends, and it's getting him to compose anything has been very difficult. But actually, last year, because everybody had, especially musicians, had their livelihoods, taken away from them, and that's as much as composers as anyone. So, I was in a position where I was able to ask a lot of composers to write something for me that we could then use in unusual circumstances.
So what kind of markers do you apply to accepting, if you like, I mean, you must have a sense of like what parish churches, what cathedrals actually, what they want, and particularly in parish churches, how that congregational participation can be affected. What kind of criteria do you give to say a piece of a commission work? I mean, presumably you get some stuff that you must say is not sure.
Oh, I got lots. Yes, I got 2 emails yesterday from 2 different people I'd never heard of, who thought that I ought to publish their. One was a set of praise responses, and one was a set of anthems for solo voice, and that one was quite interesting because it was actually composed by the professor of music at one of the colleges that I'd applied for in 1978, right. and he didn't offer me a place, so he's going to get very short shrift.
Vengeance is mine, said the Lord.
Yes, and best served cold.
Oh, right.
But it was both pieces were quite esoteric, and one thing I think I've been able to develop is a sense of what works for parish choirs. I have been working with parish choirs of varying quality since the well, since 1987, I think, was my first director of music job. Certainly, I know what works at Fordingbridge, and the choir is probably on the upper side of being of a standard parish choir, when we're allowed to sing, that is.
It's coming.
But we're even Fordingbridge are having problems, having
We're breaking up a bit.
For instance, and if anybody watching this wants to, okay, yeah, I know my internet connection isn't great despite having full fibre. So yeah, it's I know what works for a church choir, and it's just a question of what comes through and making sure that what we publish is usable, really, and attractive.
Sure. So Tim, we're coming towards the end of our time together. Gosh, it does go quickly. And I'm wondering, you must have so many memorable occasions, some sweet and some sour. And I'm wondering, particularly with choirs.
Yes.
And I'm wondering whether you can recall a couple of those for us.
Yeah. Well, probably the most exciting thing I've done when there's another phone call. This is that
your life is full of phone calls.
I know, yes, and I can't stand the phone. Actually, I hate phone calls. But I got this phone call from Peter Nardone, who I'd kind of lost touch with a bit, and he said, "Well, I'm director of music at Croydon Parish Church, as it was called then, and I need an alto. We have two male altos here, both of whom are beyond retirement age and sound like a couple of strangled chickens." And Peter and I had sort of sung together in a choir called the Worthy Company of Singers, based in Crawley. Actually, it was in Worth, which is quite. It was called the Worthy Company of Singers, and so we'd sung next to each other, so he knew what I was like, and so he asked me to come and sing at Croydon, and it was great because Croydon Parish Church is one of those greater churches. It's sort of I suppose aspires to cathedral repertoire, and Peter is a fantastic choir director, absolutely amazing, and so I did that for about 3 years, and he then got appointed as director of music at Chelmsford Cathedral. So he left at the beginning of 2000, and they'd appointed somebody who would start after Easter. So the Vicar of Croydon, Colin Boswell, asked me, would I look after the choir while they, in that. And one of the really exciting things we did was to take the choir to St George's Chapel, Windsor, to do evensong. And that for me is probably one of the musical church choir highlights.
Beautiful place, of course.
Yeah,
beautiful building. I mean,
and the organ scholar at St George's had actually previously been the organ scholar at Croydon, so I knew him and actually his dad really, really well. We were really good friends, and so we hired a coach and went off to St George's, and a couple of years after I then went to be director of music at Holy Trinity Forest Row, and we took the choir to Chelmsford Cathedral, where we sung to literally 2 people in the congregation. But it was a great experience, it was still, to the greater glory of God. It didn't matter.
The Opus Dei goes on.
Yes, it does.
Despite who's in the congregation, who's not.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So, And very, very briefly, one kind of, not exactly a disaster, but one memory that probably you wouldn't cherish to kind of entertain too much. Things must happen in choirs.
Well, actually, the one thing that really springs to mind is when I was a teenager, I was in the Brighton Youth Orchestra. I was the principal flautist in Canada and the west coast of America. And there was, we did a concert in Toronto. The night before, a lot of us got very, very drunk, which was quite an achievement because in Canada and America, it's actually quite difficult to get a drink, but somehow we managed it. And
yep.
The thing, we were doing Sibelius' First Symphony, and there's a middle movement. I think it's a scherzo that starts off with the timpani going bum 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 ba da dum bum. And then everybody comes in, and really stirring stuff. And unfortunately, the timpanist at the time was suffering from a major hangover, and so they start sort of was more like and so a complete and utter disaster. But we got through it. It was very, very funny though.
Right. So finally, then. It must be well, I'm going to ask you the question, but I guess it's probably quite impossible for you to say what's your favorite piece of music.
Well, it is difficult, but one of the great things about my RSCM job is, as I've said, working with composers. And I remember getting a phone call, I think it was in 2009, from a very lovely lady called Margaret Ritzer, who had a huge argument with her then publisher, Kevin Mayhew. And she phoned me. She'd been in touch with John Harper, who had previously been the director of the RSCM, who suggested she phone me. So we had this lovely phone call, and then we met over lunch. And so I've known her for about, I suppose, about 12, 13 years, and got to know her really well. And she is an utter inspiration. She's now well into her 90s, but she wrote me a wonderful anthem based on. I gave her the Holy Trinity service book for the season of Trinity. You'll know it has the green cover with,
yes, indeed,
the sort of Gaelic, and it has some wonderful things that Mark Godson put together, including a most wonderful prayer for the blessing of the bread and wine, and it's be gentle when you touch bread.
Yes, indeed.
And it's a thing. It's a thing of great beauty. The prayer is a thing of great beauty, and she set it to music, and that in itself is a very, very beautiful thing. So I think, I've had, I suppose, a number of things written for me. It says dedicated. Tommy Hewitt-Jones has written me loads of stuff over the years, and it's a huge privilege. And Peter Nardone, and a lot of other Bill Grayston Ives. It's another favourite composer of mine. But I think it's this because it combines it combines something that is special to to St Mary's Fordingbridge with my love for liturgy and prayerful music.
What a lovely way to bring this really fascinating interview to a close, and I'm just kind of reeling with the kind of richness that has been part of your life, and I hope will continue to be part of your life and contribution to liturgy and music in the church. Tim, thank you so much this morning for this interview.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.